Afternoon. It's 12 noon. We're so glad to have you here today. My name's Rowena Zimmerman, and I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach for Blue Ridge Prism. We're here together to talk about Unlucky 13, the 13 new additions to the Virginia invasive plant species list. If you have any audio issues, as in you couldn't hear me right now, these are just a few tips to make sure that your Zoom audio is connected correctly. One of the last things you could do is you could log out and come back in and see if that helps. But also just know that closed captioning is enabled, so you can turn it on at the bottom of your screen and you'll see a typed transcript of everything that's being said. Other Zoom tips or housekeeping that I'd like to share with you. Right now, I asked you to write in the chat where you're from and where you're joining us from. And so the chat box right here is for you to ask us, like to tell us where you're from and to share information. But if you have any questions for our experts, we ask that you put it in the Q&A tab that is on the bottom of your screen. That really helps. And speaking of which, we've got Rod Walker, who is going to be doing the presentation for you today. Lauren Taylor, our executive director. Jacob Edel, who is one of our invasive management specialists, and William Hamersky and Tim Maywalt, who are our instructors. That they do a great job. So they'll be here to answer any questions that you've got. So just type them into the Q&A tab and they can help you. If you have any additional questions that we weren't able to answer for you, just go ahead and contact us at info@blueridgeprism.org. And if you want to find out what other events you can join us at, we've got the tab up for you, and Lauren's going to type it into the chat now, blueridgeprism.org/events. That will tell you everything that we've got coming up. So right now, I'd like to introduce Rod Walker, who's the president of Blue Ridge Prism. Rod is the founder and president of Blue Ridge Prism and has been a major component and proponent of invasive plant management for a long time now. And we're just so happy to have him here with us today. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Rod do that.
Okay, let me let me go see if I can get this set up correctly here. Let's see here. Okay, let's go here. Oh, okay, and now I go here, and then I go there. Does that look right, Rowena?
Perfect. That's perfect. Okay, here's Rod, everyone.
Okay, welcome everybody. Delighted to be here. Glad you could make it. I'm going to go through a couple of things here. Primarily, of course, go through the 13 new plants that were listed by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. So there's now 103 plants on their invasive plant list. If we've got time at the end, I'll go through 3 or 4 other plants that are you're more familiar with, but that are actually out there emerging as we speak. But I'm going to focus on the 13 and then see if we can answer any questions you may have about them. As I go through these, well, here they are. So they're broken down into trees, vines, shrubs, forbs of grasses, and aquatics. So there's lots of different kinds of plants here. At the end of the discussion, the 3 or 4 slides on each of these plants, you'll see a little map. The map comes from iNaturalist. And what you're going to see is that some of these are, very limited in their distribution at this point in the state of Virginia, but that's at least according to iNaturalist. So yeah, which is probably understating in most cases the distribution of these plants. So this is an opportunity for you to learn about them and keep your eyes open. And if you find them in a different place than what these maps show, then perhaps you would be willing to report them also, so that people are aware as how fast these things are moving across the state. So having said all that, I'm going to launch into this and start with, the one tree that's just been added to the list. So here we have the Chinese tallow tree. It's a deciduous tree that's kind of a small to medium-sized tree. It gets to be 60 feet tall. It grows in lots of different kinds of habitats. It's got beautiful fall foliage. It's long-lived. This thing can live 100 years, and it does spread largely by seed. So when you look at this, you can see it's got these waxy diamond-shaped leaves up here, uh, and the flowers over here, on the right are on, they're white to yellow, green, yellow flowers on 8-inch spikes. And then, of course, you got the seed pods. And the seed pods, when you open them up, what you see is they've got this popcorn-like seeds, which actually was one of the things that happens, is people sometimes refer to this as a popcorn tree. So interesting animal. I've never seen one in person in this case. It also happens to like wet areas and stream banks. If it had its druthers, yeah, that's probably where it would show up. But as you can see, it gets, pretty dense here. It's shade tolerant. It will grow in undisturbed forests and create a monoculture. The sap is actually slightly toxic. It's pretty aggressive from the standpoint of it can produce 100,000 seeds per year. And if it's in the right place, it really likes where it is, it could grow anywhere from 7 to 13 feet in a single year. And if you just cut it off, it will aggressively resprout. So here's the good news for most of us is that, as you can see, this one is not widely distributed. Yeah, the red dots are basically down here in Southeast Virginia. So there's not a lot of it, but again, the rest of us need to keep our eyes open and see if we find it show up someplace. So now we've got one vine, and this is just kind of the opposite, which is this is found really throughout Virginia. It's a very fast growing climbing vine that'll overtop the local vegetation. I see this primarily, of course, in the fall when it's blooming along the roadsides, and you just see a mass of this vine, overcoming the shrubs and things along the side of the road. It's pretty tolerant of shade, and so therefore it can invade a healthy forest. It does have seeds that are, dispersed, by birds and other things, but apparently it's toxic. This is also toxic, at least to mammals. So here you can see this picture right here, with the massive flowers is what you typically see in the fall, growing along a roadside. You can see the leaves here with the stripe down the middle, close up of the flowers. It's actually very pretty. It can be easily confused with a native clematis, the native virgin's bower. But you'll see if you look at this, the leaves are nothing like the same. I mean, they're quite different, as well as the flowers are quite different. But again, and here's the map. So as you can see, this one really does show up, over large parts of the state. I certainly see plenty of it around here in the fall. Okay, so on to shrubs. We got 4 shrubs that have been added to the list. And the first one here is leatherleaf mahonia. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but this is one that actually, if you're out there walking around now, it's not only is it evergreen, but it's actually blooming at this point. So it's going to have its stalks of flowers going up. This thing can get about up to 6 feet in height. It can really it's a forest understory plant in my experience, or along the edges. So it can create some fairly dense stands, under the forest canopy. And again, the seeds are spread by the wind and wildlife. So here you have some pictures. So this is the flower stalks right here that you're seeing at this time of the year. Later on, it's got these masses of these berries. And then you can see the leaves. The real leaf configuration here is they're leathery leaves, and they're opposite on the stem with the terminal leaf. The leaves are quite leathery, and it's really, people look at this and they think they're looking at a holly. But if you look at this comparison, here's the holly here with the red berries. It would and the leaves are somewhat different, and you'll notice the leaves actually each have a little stem on them. But yeah, there's no leaf stem, yeah, for the Mahonia. So it's pretty easy to tell the difference. You know, you just again, most people look at it and think they're looking at a holly, but they're not. So just be sensitive to that. And again, this is another one that's widely distributed and spread all over the state. You can see in a lot of these that there's a lot of reporting going on, at least around Richmond, around Northern Virginia, and some around Charlottesville. So that's the leatherleaf Mahonia. Here we have Nandina. This is one of several that are still being sold in the trade. So you can see this this is a shrub that grows 5 feet in height according to the specs here. On the other hand, I will tell you that like 2 days ago I was at a meeting, and where I parked in the parking lot there was one that was easily taller than I am. So it's probably 7 feet tall. So they can get pretty big, and it was also probably 7 feet or 10 feet wide. It was quite large. So yeah, this is one where you may have heard that the berries are somewhat toxic to the cedar waxwing, in particular because of some cyanide in it. But again, this is another forest understory plant, and there are some root suckers that can create the dense stands like the one I saw just the other day. So if you look at the more detailed pictures, yeah, you can see the red berries, you can see the leaves with the stripe down the middle. It's got a very upright, kind of a cane-like stems. It flowers, here in the late spring. It prefers full sun, or it can even do full shade though. It's pretty drought tolerant, and the foliage can actually vary depending upon how much sun it's getting. And there's a variety of this that you might find that's got white berries instead of red berries. And if you look at the stems, you might think, gee, this is similar to a bamboo in terms of just what the skinny little stems look like. And again, here's a low one growing to the ground, which is quite different than the one I saw the other day, which was quite large. And again, this is largely everywhere. Thank you to the industry for selling it. So it's widely distributed, commonly used as a landscaping plant, but it's not one that people should be planting at this point. Okay, next up, we have the orange eye butterfly bush. Again, this is another shrub. It grows, can be pretty tall, 15 feet, and can escape. It likes stream banks, disturbed areas, fields and parks. But it's an interesting thing that the pollinators really like the nectar. Yeah, but the larva of the pollinators will not thrive or survive on this plant. It does produce a lot of seeds, and we've got some pictures here. So orange eye, look at the orange eye. There you go. That's an easy way to see it, and you can see the shape of the shrub here, and the leaves are opposite, 6 to 10 inches long. The flowers can be purple, but they can also be white or pink, and they do produce lots of nectar, which is why the butterflies love this plant. And as you can see here, it can get quite big and tall, and create a pretty dense patch. And again, this one's not quite as densely populated around the state, but it's spread. It's pretty much everywhere, at least to some degree. So here's one I had not encountered in person until recently. Trifoliate orange. It's here. It was labeled as a small tree that grows 8 to 30 feet in height, but it really, what it's famous for is producing dense, thorny, impenetrable thickets. Yeah, that very shady, and it will invade the woodlands, and it really likes the edges. You can see in the picture right here, it's got a three-lobed leaf. You can see also a close-up of the thorns because it is extremely thorny. Uh, and it's a very dramatic plant that's easily spotted. And you will see some pictures. If you look at this one here, you can see all the stems and thorns. It's like it's all stem and thorn. It's got some nice white flowers, but in fact, it has in the early fall, it does have a lemon-like fruit. It's exceedingly sour. It's got lots of seeds. It's actually slightly toxic. So, if you're going to eat any, don't eat a lot. Or some people do make marmalade out of it from the peel and the pulp, but you got to be careful. But you look at the hand here on this thing, and then you go see it, look at it from a distance. Boy, it looks like the plant from hell, if you'll pardon the phrase. It's all prickles and stem, and nasty to deal with. If you're ever tempted to think it looks like greenbrier, well, the answer is the thorns on the orange are much more devastating, even though greenbrier is difficult to deal with. But there's the fruits and the leaves and the stems are quite different. But if you find trifoliate orange, you've got your hands full. It's a tough one to deal with. And again, it's showing up pretty much across a large part of the state. So it's becoming, unfortunately, pretty common. And then we've got four grasses and forbs, starting with cenchrus, fountain grass. This is one that can grow, 1 to 3 feet high. But remember, look at these seed heads on here, or blooms, if you will, and keep your eyes on these as we look at the different pictures. This is one that moves around fairly easily, and it really forms these dense bunches. It shows up in lots of different kinds of areas, be it parks, fields, roadsides, and spreads by both seeds and rhizomes. There's really, if you look in the native flora, the Flora of Virginia book, you won't find anything, particularly when you're looking at the flower seed heads, you won't find anything quite like it. So once you see these things, it's pretty easy to detect. But when those are not in evident, it's hard to understand what it really is because it looks like just another low-growing grassy clump. So again, here if you look at all this, you'll see some of the different things that are characteristic of it. The leaves do change color, over the season. The leaves can be 2 to 3 feet long. The flower stems going up can be 3 to 4 feet tall. And so, and very, very hairy looking when you get up close and look at them. And again, here's just a picture of it growing along the roadside. So it's easily distinguished at that time of the year when it's got the dark seed heads. It does like sun, and it will turn yellow in the fall after it's done seeding. This one, again, it's got some distribution all over the state. It's not as popular as some of those others, but again, lots of sightings and recordings happening up in Northern Virginia. And so here we have incised fumwort, Crotalus incisa. It's an herbaceous plant, and this one only gets 4 to 24 inches tall. But this really likes to be along streams, rivers, well drained floodplains, if you will. It's an early spring plant. It's out there now. It seeds vigorously. It can either be annual or biennial. It varies a little bit. It's in the poppy family. And when we look at the leaves, this will be an interesting discussion here. And it's extremely shade tolerant. So you'll look at these leaves and you say, hey, gee, they actually resemble parsley for all us vegetable gardens and herbalists. But of course, the flowers are quite distinctive. So this is the time of year when it's going out there flowering, to find this. It creates these seed capsules that actually explode and can send the seeds up to 10 feet away. And in early summer, early to midsummer, it dies back. And then in the fall, it sprouts and puts up a rosette of leaves that emerge from the tuber and overwinters in that condition. So here's again a picture of a dense mat of it, across the forest floor. And here we have, so if you look at the leaves, there's some similarity amongst the leaves between the native yellow fumewort and the invasive incised fumewort. And in fact, there's a slide here that attempts to compare the two, but you can tell they're somewhat different, but they're close enough that I would recommend you really need to go look for the flowers. And again, showing up more and more places around central Virginia and northern Virginia, but it's on the move. And given that it likes to grow along wet areas, I suspect spring floods and things are doing a good job of spreading it around. Italian arum, Arum italica. This is an interesting plant. And this is one I have some limited experience with. It's an herbaceous plant. It's got very striking leaf. The veins in the leaves are quite striking, as are the seed heads. It comes up early in the spring. This is reportedly very difficult to get rid of. And of course, it's another one that's toxic if it's ingested by mammals and can produce some skin irritation as well. It likes to be in moist forest and riparian edges, and it is a perennial. So it will continue to grow and spread year over year. It gets to be about 12 to 18 inches tall, and it spreads both by seeds and tubers. But again, very dramatic plant. I mean, look at the leaves. The leaves are very striking, and of course the flower fruiting stems are also extremely striking. Really easy to distinguish if you find it out there. I've seen it here in the Charlottesville area in a couple of places, but I haven't seen a lot of it yet. I'm up in Northern Virginia. I think people have seen a lot more of it. So again, going forward, it creates these fairly dense patches. Again, this is another one where the flowers and the leaves die back in late summer, but the berry stalks are still sticking up. So if you are trying to remove this, it's a plant where you want to make sure you get all the plant parts and dispose of them properly, because it could easily reproduce. So I don't really think there's a huge risk here of confusing this with Jack in the Pulpit, but it's probably the closest thing to it just because of the pulpit here, and before it gets that orange flower fruit stem, it kind of looks like it. So don't be confused if you see this thing. That doesn't mean you've got Jack in the Pulpit. And again, distribution, again, it's spreading all over the state. A lot up in Northern Virginia, but it's showing up around here in Richmond and elsewhere as well. So stay tuned. So Ravenna grass. So here we have one that's only showing up in a few counties. It's a very tall grass. We're getting 6 to 13 feet in height. Can hang out in lots of different kinds of places, but it really likes the moist ones. It produces lots and lots of biomass, if you will, which makes it a bit more of a fire risk. It's got really dense roots that create mats under the ground that really inhibit the native plants. So you can see here, it's got these long, skinny leaves with a white strip in the center. These leaves can be literally 3 to 4 feet long and only maybe half an inch to an inch wide. You've got a hairy ligule here where the leaf comes down and joins the stem. That's pretty indicative. There are some similar plants out there that you might confuse it with. When you look at the tall if you will, stems here. But most of the ones you would confuse it with would be pampas grass or Chinese miscanthus or phragmites or something like that, all of which are also invasive. But to be a positive ID, you do need to check around. There is a native Indian grass which can look kind of similar, but it's yellow and fairly easily distinguished. Whereas and of course the Ravenna grass can get a lot taller than the yellow Indian grass too. And this one only shows up so far in iNaturalist in a couple of places, but again it may be underreported. So keep your eyes open. So now we've got 3 aquatics. So if any of you have ponds on your property, here's some things to watch out for. So first we've got curled pondweed. This is fairly widespread. It's a submerged aquatic. It's got dense growth, again, that dies back in the summer. And it spreads by fragments and seeds and the buds and things. It's competitive in the early growing season with the native submerged vegetation. So it is attached to the bottom of the pond, if you will, by rhizomes. So here's some more, again, the curled leaf. No kidding. Very, very curly. The leaves can be up to 3 inches wide and 3 inches long, excuse me. But look at how this stuff operates here. It actually flowers above the surface in the spring. It can live in water 15 feet deep, and it survives under the ice in the winter because it really likes cold water. So actually, the new growth actually starts in the late summer, and then it continues to grow through the winter, and it dies back in July after dropping its seed. So it's got an interesting life cycle. But when it's in full bore, look, it just creates these incredible masses of plants that can really clog up a waterway or a pond. If you happen to live in an area where there's a lot of fertilizer runoff, this plant really likes that and will really go nuts if you're in a fertilizer runoff area. And again, in terms of distribution, spotty. But again, it's not a terrestrial; it's an aquatic, so it's not going to be reported in nearly as many places. But it's clearly been reported in various different locations around the state. And here we have another one, floating primrose willow. Again, spread around the state. It's both emergent and floating freshwater plant. It also creates dense mats on the surface of the water, very, very flood intolerant and drought tolerant, and has some allelopathic chemical suppression for other species. But if you look here, what you're going to start seeing is it blooms above the water, and it's got these nice looking yellow flowers. The leaves are alternate; they're not opposite. But the leaves also have some different shapes. You can see the roundish ones here and the longish ones there. And they're glossy leaves with a fairly pronounced midrib, if you will. And now look at this. I mean, boy, it really grows up and dominates the space and creates these impenetrable mats across the surface of the water. Pretty nasty stuff. Now, there's a native water purslane that I don't think you're likely to confuse it with, and the natives has got opposite leaves as opposed to alternating leaves. The leaves are different shapes, and I don't think the flowering is going to be anything similar at all. And again, spotty around different parts of the state. Again, a lot of Northern Virginia in this case. And then we've got one more aquatic, the two-horned trappa. So two-horned trappa has been verified now in 8 counties. This is both a floating and rooted aquatic plant. It occurs in fresh water in pretty much any kind of body of water. And you'll see some pictures. It's got pretty dense growth that covers the surface of the water. Waterfowl actually move the seed pods, and it's been rapidly spreading, since it was discovered in 2014. And so if you've got this, if you see this show up, again, it's worth reporting. It's a nasty plant. It can live in water, up to 12 feet deep. It is an annual, so it's going to die back and resprout from seed every year. But and these seed pods are really tricky. So it's two-horn trappa. That's because it refers to the two horns on the seed pod, and they're really sharp. They can go through your gloves or your shoes. And here you can see a picture of it spreading across the water. And also the leaves, while they're green on top, they're somewhat reddish, underneath. And again, this will go to seed in late June or early July. But if you've got this one, it's a nasty, fast-spreading plant that's not easy to control. So if you find it, you need to get on it. And in terms of the distribution, again, mostly up in Northern Virginia so far. But again, if you've got ponds and waterways, keep your eyes out for this one. It's pretty distinctive, pretty easy to detect if you've got it growing there. And if it shows up, it won't be subtle. It'll spread quickly and it'll be obvious in short order that you got lots of it. So there are a couple of slides here that just kind of illustrate control methods just at a very high level. And what you see here is the items marked in red. Those X's say those are things you can do this time of year. So something like incised fumort that's out, can be worked on with any technique at this time of the year. Others like Chinese tallow tree, you don't want to deal with that until later in the year after the leaves are out, and the sap will take it down. And again, some of the aquatics are not really visible or available yet. Fountain grass is you can dig it out, but the leaves aren't out yet. And then over here we've got the Italian arum, which you can do pretty much any time, as with the Mahonia and the Nandina. So some of these others, you can see again, they can be dug out anytime you can find them. But whether you cut, stump them, or foliar spray, obviously you're not going to do foliar spray until the leaves are out. And same thing with sweet autumn clematis will not be visible for a while. Trifoliate orange, boy, anytime you can get that out, you want to do it. And again, the two-horn trappa is not visible at this point. So there are fact sheets available for each of these plants. Rowena, are these fact sheets all accessible through our website?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, good. So the next set of slides I have here are going to talk about 4 other plants that are not the new arrivals onto the DCR list of invasive plants. And so before I go to those, I'm just wondering whether there's any questions we should address on these before I kind of switch subjects.
Okay. Well, let's see. Let me turn to the panel and see if are there any questions you all got that you think would be helpful to everyone here that people asked? How about you, Lauren?
Bear with me 1 second, getting back to the Q&A. Let's see, one person asked if there was a native Mahonia. So there is a Mahonia that is native to the Pacific Northwest. However, there is no Mahonia that is native to Virginia. So if you see Mahonia growing here, it is non-native. There was a question asked about the native Corydalus. I think that's the fumewort. I think Rod answered those questions. And Ellen asked what our data source was for distribution. And for the purposes of this presentation, we're using verifiable photo pins on iNaturalist, which is citizen science based. So you tend to get a broader representation, but we're looking for the research grade verifiable posts on there. And that was pretty much it so far. We had very few questions.
There is one more question from Lydia about why foliar spray is not recommended for some of the plants. And I believe it's just because there aren't any leaves out and you don't really want to spray leaves in the spring when they're just coming up, because you're fighting the plant's natural juices coming up to create the leaves, and you want the herbicide to go down to the roots.
We do have a new question that just came in. I believe this was about the sancbrus, the fountain grass. If you cut the seeds off before they mature, are the seed heads still viable? So when I see fountain grass, I cut the seeds and I bag and trash them. I don't know how long they stay viable once they begin to take on that purplish hue, which is about the only time you can really recognize this plant. So the safest thing is bag and trash them.
Okay, and I saw that Jacob turned off his mute. Jacob, did you want to share a question?
Yes, I was going to address Carrie's question about the seeds. The problem
Okay.
there is the timing, like Lauren said. The easy idea is when they're purple as they're reaching maturity. So if you can catch them while they're still relatively green right after flowering, they won't ripen and mature. But by the time you can notice them, they're already pretty much there. So it's a very tight timing issue.
Okay. And one thing we did want to make sure you saw that it's a good idea to report sightings in the wild of a lot of these things. And Lauren put into the chat the link to the VDAX website, especially for things like two-horn trappa, where they're still trying really hard to control that and to keep that contained. So look in the chat. Lauren might just put it in again about how to report to VDAX, and we'd really appreciate you helping out as much as you can with that. Okay, Rod.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to just flip through some a small number of slides, if you will, that have to do with these 4 specific species: Bradford pear, garlic mustard, lesser celandine, and multiflora rose, because these are all ones that are there may be others, but these are ones that are particularly visible at this time of year. So Bradford pear, hey, look, if you're driving around and you're seeing, conically shaped trees, blooming white along the roadside, there's a good chance you're looking at a Bradford or Calvary pear. It's one of the earliest trees to bloom in the springtime, bright white flowers, and the leaves will come out after the flowers. So it's highly visible right now. You can close up with the flowers. You can see when the leaves come out, they're going to be really glossy. Eventually they'll have these, hard to see in the picture a little bit, but you can see there's these little round fruits here that come out on it, and it does get red leaves in the fall. But one of the other things this plant is famous for is thorns, serious thorns. Capable of puncturing a tractor tire or pretty much anything else. They're really strong and nasty. So if you're dealing with this plant, just be really careful. But again, when you're out there looking around, driving around, you see white upright trees, blooming white. Again, good chance it's one of these, and sometimes you'll see lots of them. There's just one slide in here for garlic mustard. Garlic mustard, tends to be green all through the winter. It's got this, rosette of leaves that are, doing just fine at this time of year. And in another, several weeks, it'll start putting, in another month probably, it'll start putting up its flower stalk. So garlic mustard is out there. It's green all winter long. And here we have lesser celandine, another one that's out now. So it got the 8-petal yellow flower. It's got very glossy leaves. And look at this mat. It just creates this incredible mat, just covers the area entirely. It loves moist areas. So yeah, look for it along stream banks and other areas where there tends to be the wet areas. This is poisonous, yeah, pretty much to all mammals. It's also called, it's got a nickname of fig buttercup, because the flowers resemble a buttercup. And it's got some similarity to our native marsh marigold. But if you have any questions about that, see the lesser celandine, fact sheet, out there on our website. It talks about the difference between the two. And the native marsh marigold is not nearly as glossy and as low growing as the lesser celandine. And then I've got a few slides in here talking about multiflora rose. So this shrub here at the base of this tree is a great big old rose bush. This is also one of the first plants to leaf out at this time of year. And in fact, what we've learned here on our property here is that we actually go out at this time of year and do a foliar spray on multiflora rose, because when it's half leafed out, it's got enough sap going up and down that a foliar spray on it will actually do a good job of killing the plant. And the native plants typically are not out yet. They're not leafed out. So using a foliar spray, you don't have a lot of collateral damage with the unintentionally killing other plants. So it's a great time of year. We only do it for like a week or two at this time of year. And then we hang it up and work on to next year. But we've been doing this for some number of years, and it works out really well. And we've made a lot of progress. So this is one that it doesn't really hit its peak in terms of blooming until more like June. But yeah, usually it creates these really dense bushes like this one, and the birds eat the rose hips and spread them around. But it's a difficult plant to deal with because it's so bushy and so thorny. And you can see it's got these backward curved thorns on it that are pretty indicative. And it's been known that a typical bush could produce as many as 1 million seeds, a really big bush that could be viable seeds can be viable for up to 20 years. If you're confused about this versus any of the other roses you might see out there, one of the indicative things is right here where the leaf comes in and joins the stem, there's a flat stipule that's got it's hairy little hairs on the stipule that gives you an indication that this is a multiflora rose. And of course, it won't be too long until we see all these flowers showing up in somewhere probably early May. You'll see flowers all over the place on this, and then it'll produce its red rose hips. So that's the end of my slides. And so if there's any other questions, we can take them now. And other than that,
Thanks, Rod. I think we actually have a few minutes. We've gotten a lot of questions about control. And I wonder if you can actually share your slides again and go through those last few, and we can have our experts here turn their faces on and just talk a little bit about how they can control these more common spring invasives. Okay, so since they're out right now, why not talk about it? And if you can just go backwards on,
which one?
well, we can do this one first. Well, you already talked about that. Let's go back to, where were you? Did you do calorie pair?
Here's calorie pair.
And then was there one before that?
No, that was the first one.
Okay. So I'm going to let William and Tim and Jacob and Lauren and Natalie just talk a little bit for a few minutes about what people should be doing with calorie pair right now. I know they shouldn't be doing anything, but unless they can pull it off.
Yeah, they
In your
shouldn't be
more
doing anything
expert
right
words,
now. Right now, what we should be doing is marking their location.
right?
And you'll see them all over the place. And if you find a place where you can sneak in there later and take care of them, marking them would help. Excuse me. So the reason you don't want to treat them right now is because the herbicide won't work well, since as soon as they finish flowering, they start to leaf out and all the sap is moving upwards and the herbicide can't get downwards into the roots. So you need to wait until it's fully leafed out. But right now is a great time to spot them and mark them for later treatment.
Right. Perfect. So unless you see like a really tiny one and you can pull it up completely by its roots, do not cut these down now, else they'll just sprout out. And you can't really treat them with herbicide right now, because it really doesn't work that well because the sap is still rising. Okay, Rod, next, garlic mustard. Experts, how would people treat garlic mustard now?
This is if the ground is wet, this is a really easy plant to pull out, complete by the roots. And usually when you pull it out, you'll find you got 3 or 4 large roots that are, anchoring the plant down. It's a great way to deal with it. And I would bag it. I would not like put it on your compost pile, because those roots can hit some more soil and then keep growing.
Okay. Any other comments?
Second thing about garlic mustard is its hand pulling is reasonable when there's not a lot of it, but you're going to find places most likely where the forest floor is covered with it, and foliar application would be appropriate there. Low concentration, 2% of your active ingredient will kill it quite quickly, and it's the only way to deal with it when you have large quantities.
Someone just asked if you can just leave garlic mustard on a log to die. How would you answer that?
So the challenge with garlic mustard is that the plant has incredible stores of energy. And if it's in its second year where it's getting ready to flower, it can continue to grow even after you pull it. And it can grow all the way to where it's actually producing seed. So unless you're dealing with a first year tiny basil rosette, the safest thing to do, you can throw it on a tarp to die in the sun, and then put it in a trash bag, bag it and trash it. It is allelopathic, so you don't want to leave it around, but you also don't want to compost it because of the seeds.
Okay. And allelopathic means that it puts out little chemicals through its roots that prevent other plants from growing around it. So you want those native plants to have a chance, so you don't want to leave the garlic mustard in the ground or near the ground. Okay, Rod, next one. Lesser celandine. This is a really hard one. What do you all suggest if they see lesser celandine right now?
If you have an isolated patch, a tiny patch of lesser celandine, you may be able to dig it out. You need to dig wide and deep, because it will spread by little bulbs beneath the ground. So you need to dig up the soil way broader out in terms of width from the plant than you may think that you need to. Don't bother trying to sift the soil. Most of the people that have tried to do that will end up just having lesser celandine come back next year. If you have a tiny little patch of it, 1 foot by 1 foot, or an isolated plant, dig wide and deep, bag the whole thing. If you end up with a hole, you can fill that with topsoil. If you have a larger patch of it, you're going to need to use an aquatic safe foliar spray.
Yes. That's a difficult one, and it's spreading. And what we've heard is if you see lesser celandine along a bank, there's a good chance there's incised fumewort there too. They tend to kind of hang out together in like the same conditions, so keep an eye out for both.
And my suspicion is that given that it's got a glossy leaf, you probably want to make sure that your foliar spray's got a surfactant in it.
Okay, and the surfactant helps the herbicide go past that glossiness,
Right.
that shell or whatever you want to call it on that.
The waxy layer.
The waxy layer, that's it. Okay. All right. Do we have another one?
That just the multiflora rose.
Okay. Let's talk about multiflora rose one more time then.
You can actually get away with a number of treatment styles here. You could relatively successfully bush hog it back if you're doing it 2 to 3 times a year, stunting its growth as long as it doesn't get the flower out, as well as coming back in after doing that or hitting it with the hedge trimmer and cut stumping it with one of those buckthorn blasters or similar herbicide daubers. That
Okay.
being 100% of a triclopyr and dye.
Right.
And then
And-
foliar once they're all leafed out.
Right. So when it's not leafed out, Tim or William, can you talk a little bit about what cut stump is?
William, why don't you talk about the technique we use with the brush cutter?
If you've got a pretty decent patch or a large area of multiflora rose, what Tim and I have figured out is a 2 or 3 person team. It's really efficient. This is when it's all leafed out. You can't get close to that plant without getting shredded. So we have 2 or 3 people. One person has a pretty powerful weed whacker with a metal blade on the end. That person is basically cutting a way into where the base of the plant's coming out of the ground. And you can have a 15-foot wide multiflora rose plant, but there's only, 5 or 6 inches or 5 or 6 stems coming out of the ground. But you have to get through all those prickles to get to that. So the first person is cutting their way in. The second person has this really cool, it's like a hooked fork to pull all those cut branches off. And the third person gets in there and then sprays each one of the stems. The amount of herbicide you use doing that is really minuscule because you're not spraying the whole plant with foliar spray, spraying the leaves with foliar. You're just hitting each one of the stems coming out of the ground. And if the canes are, 1 inch in diameter or a 1/2 inch diameter, a single drop of herbicide is probably adequate to coat the stem and kill the entire root system.
So,
I wanted to mention that Rod, somebody asked to see the photo of the stipule again.
Oh, hang on. Well, this is one view of it here, where you see it coming up and down here.
So you have that feature on the invasive. On the native rose, it's smooth. It's not hairy like that. So
Right.
they're quite different if you look closely.
And we've got the backward bending, the prickles here too.
yeah, and sometimes we refer to them as cat claws. They make you think of cat claws, and that's a way to think of them. We just got a question that someone heard that if you cut down a pear tree, it will not sprout back.
Not
I know
if
that's
you use
not
if you don't
true.
use herbicide, it's not only going to sprout back, but it's going to sprout back at about 15 to 1.
Right. So I wanted you guys to say it, but yes, I've actually seen it in my neighborhood. Someone's just cut it down and it's come back even thicker. So that is not true. You do have to treat it if you're just going to cut it.
And
Like planted, yes.
one comment to Kate C about doing lots of multiflora rose with the buckthorn blaster. You've got my vote because that's a tough plant to get to. If you see a lot of multiflora rose getting in there with a dauber, keep at it. Keep at it.
Yeah, hopefully you're wearing long sleeves and protecting yourself so you're not getting scratched and everything. So we have just a few minutes left, and I can wrap up unless you guys have anything else you want to address to the audience. No?
I think I did want to clarify one of my answers to Carrie about multiflora rose.
Okay.
You can treat it with both triclopyramine for foliar as well as glyphosate. Both chemicals do work. A lot of recommendations do tend towards glyphosate, as it's a little easier to get a hold of or applies to a few more plants that multiflora rose grows around.
Okay, great.
I-
So,
I will just mention, since we have a minute or two,
yeah,
for the audience, that earlier this week, the governor signed a bill
yes,
that we were instrumental in putting forward, that will require, starting in the beginning of 2027, it will require retailers to post signage proximate to any of the plants on the Department of Conservation and Recreation's list of invasive plants. So there's 30 or 40, invasive plants on that list that are still for sale in Virginia. And they will now have to be signage located near them, indicating that they are indeed invasive plants. So stay tuned. It's going to take a while for all this to get worked through the legal process, but the governor signed the bill. And so over time, we're on the way.
yes, and we're thrilled. We think it's a really great step forward for invasive plant education. And we just hope that, we just continue to work on this and eventually we can get rid of the sale of invasive plants completely. So anyway, we only have a few minutes left unless anyone else here has anything else they want to say. Panel, Tim?
I wanted to mention that if you can picture again the maps that we showed for the new 13 identified plants, the concentrations in virtually every case were around communities. So these plants are garden escapees, basically, or they're disturbed soil growth plants. So it's where people are concentrated that the invasive plants are concentrated. So it has something to do with, they're being sold routinely. People are planting them routinely, they're escaping, and we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, the fountain grass in particular, which was largely reported up in the Northern Virginia area. 2 years ago, I moved from Northern Virginia down to Central Virginia, and sancris was not largely visible here, the fountain grass. These seed heads get picked up in your tire treads. And so all of a sudden, last fall, fountain grass was showing up in the medians along 29 and along the roadsides and along 33. It's being spread by mowing equipment, by tractor trailers, by people driving to the mountains on vacation. And so the spread is lightning fast by car tire treads, truck tire treads are one of the major vectors. So just because the maps that we showed you today may have limited distribution, a year from now, that could be completely different.
Thank you, Lauren and Tim. Those are excellent points. And I know with fountain grass in particular, we have a lot of farmers who are dealing with that right now. It's taken over their fields and they just do not know what to do. It's really, really hurting their farm production in there and, just taking up whole bits of land.
There's
sorry.
one more question about winter creeper.
Yeah.
Any ideas for winter creeper? It's evergreen or semi-evergreen here, so you can almost always cut stump it. If it's climbing your trees or fence posts or whatever. On the ground, it's a different story. That's a whole different, it's a different ball of wax to get it off the ground because it will root at every few inches at a node. And if you try pulling it up, you miss one little piece and you get the plant back again. But for climbing it, for the plants that are climbing the trees, those are the ones you really want to get because they're the ones that are going to flower and fruit and then have birds pick up and carry the fruits to other places unknown. So you could either cut stump or foliar spray winter creeper now.
Yes. And we just talked about how you would cut stump, which is cut and then just apply a little bit of herbicide to the cut surfaces. So our next event is an in-person event, and we hope we have a few spaces left. And we hope those of you who are near the Albemarle County area can join us. It's a 2-hour event where we're going to do hands-on training on how to control the invasive plants that you see right now in the spring. And we're going to do a little plant walk around the property, so to help you identify them in real person, so you see what they look like right in front of you, and help you look for the different traits that would tell you what they are. And that will be taking place at Mountain Light Retreat, which is in Crozet. Well, the address is Crozet, Virginia. And on March 30th from 11 to 1 p.m., if you put your phone against that QR code, it'll bring you to the registration site, or you can go onto our website, www.blueridgeprism, to find out more. Finally, we are just really grateful you guys were here today and joining us. As you can see from this slide, there's a lot of ways you can get involved with the Blue Ridge Prism. You can volunteer, and you can support our work, which enables us to provide programs like this and all the other programs we do throughout the year. And so if you are inclined to do that thing, we're really grateful, because we rely so much on private donations, from individual donations from the public, to help our organization operate. If you need to contact us with any more questions, please go ahead and email us at info@blueridgeprism.org. And that's also if you want to volunteer, contact us at that address. So one final thing, this webinar was recorded, so I'll be sending you the recording in